said, if you know anything about California, our history in so many respects, it's all about water. I wrote my dissertation on water in 1976 before most of the people in this room were born, and have been deeply engaged in this process for so many years. The famous Mark Twain said, as those in the room that might know, whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting over in California. Southern California economy is bigger than 18 states combined. And in our Los Angeles County, LAEDC, our economy is bigger than Poland, Argentina, Sweden, Norway, Ireland, Israel, and others. And yet we have very little natural water in Southern California. Our forefathers have been great engineers in sticking a straw, so to speak, in the Colorado River and bringing water 252 miles, stealing it from the other 7 states that are belly aching about us stealing their water, and stealing water through a state project, an LA project, Bill Mulholland, and a federal water project in Northern California. And that's why, for those of us in the legislature, fighting between the North and the South is always challenging. They're always pissed off that we're stealing all their water. Understanding California's water needs, a young British entrepreneur discovered an extraordinary desert aquifer in the Mojave Desert, and has been trying to find ways to make this important water supply meaningful for California. That project is known as Cadiz. I represented him decades ago. It's been an uphill battle over many, many years, but there's a new combatant at the helm of Cadiz, and she is the CEO and chairman of Cadiz, and has pulled together a new and impressive board of directors to take Cadiz in a new and important direction. This new CEO has the political skills of Niccolo Machiavelli, the communication skills of Wild Bill Clinton, and the strategic skills of Tom Friedman. She served, as David said, as she mentioned, Dianne Feinstein was cabinet secretary and deputy chief of staff to Governor Gray Davis, and served in the Public Utilities Commission and chief of staff to Arnold Schwarzenegger, the great Arnold Schwarzenegger. Her name is Susan P. Kennedy. She is here today, ladies and gentlemen, to present a new and dynamic vision, as David said, for California Water Policy 3.0. I'm excited to hear that vision and listen enthusiastically to her important contribution. Ladies and gentlemen, Susan P. Kennedy.
For those of you who don't know me, I'm also known as the Forrest Gump of emergencies in California. Somehow I managed to end up on the front line of whatever the worst thing is that's happening in the state. But I am very, very fortunate to now be on the front lines of water. And I believe, without a doubt, that access to clean water is going to be the single greatest climate challenge the world faces in the next decade. Not the next 50 years, not the next 40 years, in the next decade. I'm going to tell you a whole bunch of things that, if you're in water, I'm about to tell you a whole bunch of things you already know. I'm going to blow through a few slides and then try to put it into context on where we are today, and then talk a little bit about Cadiz and how I think we're going to be a major part of the solution for not just California, but also the Southwest. I'm going to start with the obvious. Earth is known as the water planet for a reason. 70% of the Earth's surface is covered by water. We do not have a water supply problem. We have a clicker problem. Okay. What we have is that climate change has completely upended the hydrological cycle that we've counted on for managing our water supplies for the last, 1,000 years or so. And we now have a whiplash, what was known as climate whiplash. Probably some of you have seen this chart. But if you look as far back as recorded history, the variation between precipitation and drought has been fairly predictable. It's been very, very predictable. And it was the first whiplash event. How many people lived in California in 1977, 78? During the drought back then? At the time, that was the worst drought we'd faced in generations. And then we had our first whiplash event where it went to massive precipitation. And if you look at the pattern since 1980, the variation is now uncontrollable. This is now the new normal. We now go from extremes. Extreme is our new normal. These were actual headlines from the LA Times that were literally just months apart, where we went from the worst drought in 1,200 years to so much snow in the snowpack that we were terrified about the flooding it was going to cause. Our problem is not water scarcity. Our problem is snow. We're losing our snowpack. And if any of you have not read the Bloomberg piece called The End of Snow, please read it. It is the most chilling expose, I think, research piece I've ever seen. But our problem is that our snowpack is declining. Even with all of the epic snowstorms we've had in recent years, and we've had them over in the years past, the steady decline in our snowpack has gone on. This is back to the 1950s. There's been almost a 25% decline in the snowpack since the 1950s, and it is an irreversible trend. Same thing is happening in the Rockies, by the way. So where do we store our fresh water? We have snow and snowmelt make up half of our fresh water. 30% in the snowpack, then the snowpack becomes snowmelt, fills up our reservoirs, and then and seeps into our groundwater. But as we're losing our snowpack, some climate scientists say we could have no snowpack in the Sierras as early as the 2040s. Think about that. The future is rain, and the future is shifting from snow in the mountains to rain at the coast. Instead of snow that predictably melts over the spring, atmospheric rivers, and it's shifting from the North Sierras and the Cascades, it's shifting to the Central Sierras and the Southern Sierras. If you look at where the snowmelt and the precipitation are moving, they're moving south. So you can see the dark on the snowmelt is moving down in the Tulare Basin and down in Southern Sierras. And if you look at the one on the right, you've got the pattern of the atmospheric rivers. The darker the spots, the darker is where the water is landing. That is where the precipitation, it's the new hydrologic cycle and where the precipitation is landing. The problem is if you look at this chart on the right, your left, all the circles is where our storage is built. And the line goes from Fresno across. All of our storage was built to capture rain and snowmelt in the Sierras. They were built around the predictable, stable snowmelt. And the second problem we have is that our infrastructure was designed by the Romans and the Egyptians about 4,000 years ago. It's all made of bricks and mortar and cement and rebar and dirt levees. And the violence of the weather patterns that are happening today is creating such a force. Water is the most destructive force on Earth. And what we've seen, starting with Hurricane Katrina, was the real calling card about how vulnerable our water infrastructure is. And now we've seen headline after headline after headline of our levees being in jeopardy, of our water systems being, every linear foot of the State Water Project and the LA Aqueduct is a crack waiting to happen. And so there's going to be trillions of dollars spent around the world just shoring up our existing infrastructure. The infrastructure investment is the largest investment since 2009, the ARA funding, $1.2 trillion in total infrastructure through 2026. About $55 billion is dedicated to drinking water, wastewater, stormwater, but most of the appropriations are dedicated to upgrading and repairing aging systems. Less than 20% is dedicated to actually finding new transmission, building new distribution systems that can actually move to where the water is now moving. Estimates are that we're going to need $1 trillion for drinking water systems by 2035. The EPA estimates $744 billion over the next 20 years, and the American Water Works Association clearly says, and they've got they're probably definitive on this, $1 trillion is going to be needed in order to put into our drinking water systems. So if we were to design the water infrastructure in California today, knowing what we know about the new hydrology, how would you do this? How would you fix our system if you knew what we knew today? First thing you do is redesign flood management north of the Delta. Flood management has to have the same priority, if not higher priority, than drought management. And that means rethinking everything, every single weir, every single levee which has been put into place is now, we're now blocking the natural flood channels where the water wants to go, and every one of them is vulnerable. But we have to be able to redesign the flood management to capture more of that water safely and sustainably, put it into groundwater and put it into storage. Second thing you would do is fix the Delta conveyance. The Delta will not survive climate change. It will not survive the next 10 or 20 years. We cannot debate whether or not there is what we do about the Delta. Somehow it has to be fixed in terms of moving water north to south. You would expand groundwater banking south of the Delta. Kern County is already groundwater banking central, but we need more groundwater banking. We need water treatment to be able to take the storm water. It's not the same thing as snowmelt trickling into the ground. We need infrastructure and treatment capability to be able to store massive amounts of storm water, and it needs to be south of the Delta. You would need to accelerate investment in stormwater capture. That's going to, LA has really taken the lead on that, and they're planning to invest a lot in stormwater capture, but the plan is going to take 30 to 50 years to fully implement. And it'll take billions of dollars, and it's a very, very big challenge, but it is an absolute necessity. And then you need in-state Colorado River storage. Right now, 30% of our water is coming from Colorado River. Lake Mead is the major source of emergency water for Southern California. So if you look at this, there's a lot of discussion about an all-of-the-above approach, right? And that sounds like it's an all-of-the-above approach, means the problem is so big we need everything. But everything is dependent upon every other thing. If you don't add more water to the system north of the Delta, it doesn't matter you're never going to fix the conveyance. You're not going to conserve your way out of fixing the Delta. You need more water to the system. So by capturing more flood water and being able to introduce more water into the Delta system, you enable a Delta fix. If you don't fix the Delta, the conveyance in the Delta, it doesn't matter how much storage you put up in Northern California. And it doesn't matter how much more water you add to the system, because you won't be able to move it south, which means Southern California has very little interest, or there's no value to storage north of the Delta if you don't fix the conveyance system. If LA succeeds in capturing the kind of water they can capture with stormwater, it will be the single most important saving aspect for the San Joaquin Valley and the Central Valley. By relieving pressure on Northern California, LA can do more to save the state and save the Delta and save the environment by capturing stormwater here and relieving pressure. But storage is the key. We're not using our snowpack. We're going to lose 30% of our storage is in snowpack. It means you have to be able to store at a dramatic pace, increase the amount of storage. So not only we need groundwater banks south of the Delta, and we need to move Lake Mead into California. We just need to move the reservoir into California's backyard. How many people think we can move Lake Mead which do you think will happen first? Moving Lake Mead into California or fixing the Delta? I'm going to introduce you to Cadiz. How many people here have heard of Cadiz? How many people here have heard good things about Cadiz? Sorry, missing hands there. All right, well, what if we could move Lake Mead into California? Cadiz is, we own 45,000 acres in the Mojave Desert. It's a 2,000 square mile watershed, 1.2 million acres. Lake Mead is 250 square miles. 160,000 acres. Its design capacity is 28 million acre-feet of storage. Cadiz, with 2,000 square miles, holds today 40 to 50 million acre-feet of water in storage today. What you don't really know about Cadiz is that if you look at where we're located, on the top of the watershed, it's like a bathtub on its side. The top of the watershed is the New York mountains. And all of it flows downhill in one very large basin into a place called Fenner Gap. And Fenner Gap, it spills over into the Cadiz Valley. Our ranch is located right there at Fenner Gap. We're at 800 feet. So 7,500 feet to 800 feet, that's a lot of water moving in one direction. It takes 1,000 years for water that fell as snow in the New York mountains to make its way underground down to Fenner Gap, where it crosses our property. And every single drop of water that makes it past our property, that's the orange, is right there at Fenner Gap. That blue line is the brine line, and it turns into brine at the Bristol Dry Lakes and evaporates. We measured how much water is evaporating at the dry lakes. It is 32,000 acre-feet a year alone is evaporating 3 miles below our property at the Bristol Dry Lakes. So it's a closed basin, so the water has nowhere to go, so it lands in the dry lakes and evaporates. So what we are doing is capturing the water before it evaporates, and by creating hydraulic control, we can import 1 million acre-feet of storage. To be able to hold an additional 1 million acre-feet of storage. We have 2.5 million acre-feet of water supply. But the key is, how do you move water, right? That's the biggest thing here, is how do you possibly move water or build new storage? So Cadiz used to be a railroad stop. We have multiple train tracks. We have multiple gas lines. So we purchased an idle gas line from El Paso Natural Gas. The blue line that crosses our pipeline, called the Northern Pipeline, it crosses our property, and it goes 220 miles, crossing the Mojave River, the LA Aqueduct to Wheeler Ridge, at the California Aqueduct at Wheeler Ridge. On the south, we have a pipeline. We bought a 99-year right-of-way along the Arizona-California Railroad, so we can build a new pipeline down to the Colorado River Aqueduct without any disturbance of new land. It's all in brownfield. And we are in the process of purchasing another couple hundred miles worth of old gas and oil pipelines that can be converted to carry water. This is, I believe, by the time we finish putting this in place, which we've got most of our permits in hand, as we've got 20 years of litigation behind us. We are shovel ready, and I'm putting finance together. I don't have anything to announce, David, today, but I'm not allowed to announce it today. But we are in the process of closing our public partners on this and putting together the project finance for it. But we will be the largest water trading bank in the southwestern United States. And our water is already in the bank. I don't have to wait for Lake Mead to refill. We will have access to it as soon as we have the pipelines to move it. There are 2.5 million miles of existing pipeline. A lot of it is either underutilized or it's being retired. And a lot of it ours has sat unused for the last 25 years. There are pipelines for sale now that go north-south in the state of California. And we will be the first in the world to actually convert gas pipelines to carry water. I believe this is the single biggest change that we can implement for climate change, is being able to utilize these pipelines to be able to move water so that we can store it where it needs to be stored, instead of trying to fight over, how do we move it between the existing facilities. I'm going to leave you with that.
Seeing no questions. Anybody have any questions you want to ask? Any insights? It's a pretty dramatic shift in terms of the big picture. I do think the big takeaway here is the idea that throughout California's history, we have relied on snow melt and snowpacks, and that's what's fundamentally shifting. And hence, Southern California needs to figure out how we're going to create storage and transporting that water throughout the region. And just to give you orders of magnitude, when you talk about an acre foot, for those who are water people, that's 1 foot deep, an acre in size. LA takes about 550,000 acre feet a year. So when she's talking about millions of acre feet, this has a substantial impact on Southern California in terms of our water source going forward. So with that, thank you so very much.